What's up, everybody? Pierre Quinn here. Thanks for joining us for another session of Worship and Word Conversations. Worship and Word Conversations is our Saturday afternoon after dinner talk about practical Christian living. And on today's program, we are focused on fatherhood and what it means to love and lead our families. I'm so excited about this conversation, not just because tomorrow is Father's Day, and hopefully in our conversation today, guys, we'll get into the fact that for the most part, according to how things are marketed, the marketing around Father's Day is trash. But we'll unpack that. We'll unpack that. Our conversation today is about fathers and fatherhood. I want to encourage you to do a couple of things as we're getting this conversation started. One, tag a father that you know. You're watching this on Facebook, tag somebody you know, or you're watching it on YouTube, let somebody know, send them the link to this conversation. The second thing is check in with us. I know this is a conversation about fathers and fatherhood, but ladies, we're glad that you are on with us as well. And we promise we'll share things that are practical to you and to your journey. And then the third thing, hit the share button so we can reach more people that really need to hear this message and this conversation today about fathers and fatherhood. Before we move deeper in, we're going to do some introductions. But before we do that, I'm going to pause. We're going to pray together. We're having a conversation about faith and fatherhood. We're really just going to ask God to give us some guidance as we share together today. So let's pray together. Lord, we're grateful for these moments where we can have a conversation about just practical living. And as we talk about fathers and fatherhood today, we ask for your guidance and take us on this journey as you challenge us. And we pray that someone benefits from our exchange today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. And amen. So amen. On today with four amazing guys, four amazing fathers, one, almost father-ish. No, you're a father. Four amazing fathers that we're having a conversation with today. And we're just going to talk. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and just kind of tell us a little bit about their families and a little bit about what they do. Kymone, let's start with you.
All right. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kymone Hinds. Presently, my wife and our three children, we live in Tampa, Florida. I am the father of three teenagers. I have a 17-year-old son driving, got his license, doing his thing. He's going to be a senior in high school next year. Then I have two daughters. One is 15, going to be a junior in high school next year. And the other is 13, about to be a freshman in high school next year. So next year, I have three children in high school, three teenagers. I need your prayers.
Oh, my. Man, RK3.
Yeah, so I'm riding Kymone's coattails a little bit. I've got 16, 14, and 12. I have a 16-year-old daughter, two sons, 14 and 12, and they are really talking a lot of smack right now about basketball and trying to wear me down a little bit. So that's where we are, man. But it's a beautiful life. I love my kids. I love what they're teaching me, and I love what God is revealing to me through them as well.
Man, that's awesome. I am Oliver Marcelle, and I am, I guess, as it relates to the gentleman on the panel, I'm probably the closest to being on the back end. Three kids, two older daughters, 30 and 25, and a 17-year-old son. So I've been through some of the stages that we're probably going to discuss today. And honestly, man, it's just been, and I know we'll get into this, but it's been a growing experience for me. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, it has been a growing experience. I have learned a myriad of things about myself through the eyes of those three kids, and now venturing into a new role as a grandfather of a 6-month-old.
Hi guys, my name is Matovu. I am the father-ish of the group. I'm definitely here to listen and learn from the gentleman on this panel. My son, Lord willing, is due in October. So just kind of going through those motions of going to the appointments, and it's kind of been edited a little bit because of COVID, so I kind of had to sit in the car and FaceTime these appointments at the doctors. But I'm enjoying the ride so far, and hoping for the best. So I'm definitely here to learn from the gentleman on the panel.
But this should be fun today. We'll try not to scare you too much, Matt.
Yeah,
can't make any promises though.
All right, cool.
And we want to encourage you who are hanging out with us. This is just going to be a really organic conversation. I'm not going to be moderating much of anything. Feel free to throw your questions or comments in the comment section, and any one of us will pick up the comments and share. We're going to start off, guys, just with a conversation to kind of set the table for a question to set the table for our conversation. And the question is relative to your experience growing up and your relationship with your father. And I want to start with RK3 with this question, and then it can go anywhere from there, guys.
Well, I'm a PK man, so I don't know if anybody else knows what that's like. It is a journey of seeing your dad in a leadership role, seeing your dad in the middle of everything from the time that you are pretty much born, seeing your dad on stage, seeing your dad as a speaker, seeing your dad responsible for a lot of things, seeing and sometimes hearing people talking about your dad, and just kind of seeing your dad as Superman, perfect. And my dad, he is still pastoring. We're trying to get him out right now, but he's still pastoring, and we've had an awesome relationship. It's evolved. It's grown over the years. And as a kid, you go through these things where you see your dad as your dad, and you never imagine being in a place with your dad where you're friends with your dad. And I can honestly say that right now, my dad and I have this great friendship relationship. I mean, we speak pretty much like 3, 4, 5 times a week, and we live 30 minutes from each other, but we speak on the phone all the time. And he's always got these ideas, business ideas that he's throwing at me. And why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Can we work? Can we collaborate? Can we do this? I need a YouTube channel. So all of that is, I mean, I'm just loving the evolution of our relationship and where we are. And I love my dad. It's been a great journey.
Man, that's what's up. I'm not a PK, but I can kind of, what you said kind of resonates with me, because my dad was a first elder for eons. And so next to the guy, if you will, was my dad. And so seeing some of that same level of responsibility, being upfront, having to deal with different issues and deal with different people and make certain tough decisions and things of that nature. Me watching my dad growing up, I kind of looked at him like this, I don't know, superhero, if you will, that I was never going to be that person. You know, he worked really hard at points in our lives. He worked more than one job. And he was doing all of that and still juggling his responsibilities at the church. And he was raising us. And for a long time, he was the sole breadwinner. So he was taking care of everything. Everything was on his shoulders. He didn't say a lot. I joke about him all the time. I say he's 85 years old now. Or is about to be 85. And I say in 85 years, he's only said 100 words. But he was just that strong, silent type. Never looked like he was phased in any way. And so I kind of grew up with this thing like, man, I don't know that I can ever be that. And it's funny because I joke with my wife now, and I'm like, I'm still trying to replicate some of the stuff that I saw in him. But what I appreciate now that he's older and I'm older is kind of along to piggyback what, RK3 said, just the ability to have conversations now. I don't know how many of you are from West Indian households, but there is a tendency in West Indian households for it to just be the relationship to be more of a my way or the highway kind of relationship. So I kind of grew up not feeling like I could ask a whole lot of questions or really kind of, push back on too many things. But now in this period of our lives, being able to dialogue back and forth and bounce ideas off and challenge each other is kind of cool.
Am I the only one that didn't grow up in a West Indian context?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Kymone, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Matthew.
Okay. So I'm also not a pastor's kid or an elder's kid. My father was absent, so I grew up in a single parent household for the majority of my life, and I actually just met my father last year. So my mother and my father weren't married. They met in the UK, which is where I was born, and grew up knowing who he was. Had some conversations on the phone. Saw pictures. But he was kind of a myth, if you could say that to me. So yeah, I have an older brother who's 9 years older than me, so he was kind of the father figure, and some other like uncles and friends along the way who kind of played that role for me. So yeah, I went to my father currently lives in Uganda, which is where both of my parents are from. That's my heritage, and so my wife and I went to Uganda last year, and I met him and some of my other siblings that I'd kind of known through social media, but had never really linked up with. So it was an interesting journey, an interesting trip to kind of. That was one of the primary reasons I'd gone over there, and also I'd never been to Uganda before. So there was a lot happening, and there's one of the things I wanted to do prior to having children, which I'd put off for a long time for many reasons, which I'm sure we'll kind of get into during the conversation. But that's the context I come in to this conversation with.
Just so you know, Matt, Uganda counts as West Indian. Just saying.
West Indian counts as Uganda. I'll counter that. But yeah, okay, fair. I guess so.
Yeah. All right. So so my relationship with my father, my parents got together. They were very young, and I remember my father is still, people tease me that my father looks younger than me. My father's in much better shape than I. But what I remember from my father, I am the first of 3 sons. So my parents have 3 sons. I'm the oldest. And my father has a very strong personality. I grew up in Trinidad, and my father was always active in church from the time that we joined when I was 5 years old. And my father, discipline was probably his number one like focus, to make sure that one, we stayed in church, involved with it, that we also did well in school, and that we stayed out of trouble. And I will say that, you know, in my teenage years, there was that time when I wanted him to be a little bit more flexible, when I wanted a little bit more freedom, and that caused some friction. I think our relationship, the weird dynamic is at 18, I moved to the US to go to college, and my father's in Trinidad. And, you know, we see each other on average now probably once a year. As I've gotten children, as my children have gotten older, our relationship has gotten better because I have more understanding of what he was trying to accomplish, his goals for us, why he was as strict as he was. Because I'll be honest, I did not like some of that, and it caused me to pull away a little bit. But I've become more understanding of him. And, you know, our relationship is still growing. And I'm sure we'll talk about that some more.
Hey, I understand that 100%. Kymone. My father's from Trinidad. So
really?
Yes, sir.
Didn't know that.
Yes,
Small
sir.
world.
That the whole discipline, and I trust me. I understand. And just kind of, you know, just wanting to kind of buck back at some of that. As we went through the teen years and some of the things that you felt like you missed out on, and you know, some of the things that, you know, they felt like they were shielding you, if you will, from that kind of thing. Man, I went through it all.
Yeah,
all of it.
You know, something that's interesting, Pierre and everybody here. One of the things with my father is he was not big into showing things like emotions and verbally saying, you know, conveying love in verbal ways. And I remember I was leaving to come here to the US. This is it. I'm leaving. I'm moving away from home. Not like they can come visit me on weekends. And, you know, I'm hugging my brothers. I had a couple of friends in the airport, and I'm getting ready to, you know, say goodbye to my dad. And my dad looks at me and says, "Keep your focus." Like those were his words to me on my way leaving. I was like, wow, this guy he stays on his message. Like he wants me to be focused on what I'm going out there for. And I still carry that, like, wow, my dad was very focused on success, staying on task. And, that's just who he was. That's just who he is. That's just him.
Yeah. I real quick, I think one of the things that reminds me of is hearing when I was in college, and we've been on West Indian parents for a little bit here, but this might be just minority parents as a whole. Affection was something that they had to learn. Right. And when we were young, they didn't really give it to us in the way that they do in their older age. And I remember sometimes specifically when I would talk to some people and they would be like, oh my gosh, your dad talks about you all the time. He's so proud of you. Oh my gosh, he's so proud. And in my mind, I'm like, well, dude, why don't you say it to me? Right, because that affection was something that I think they struggled with because their own parents didn't really give it to them in that way. I'm looking at the comments here. Kanika's like, discipline equals their love language.
Jesus translation, plenty licks.
Yeah. So I mean, we definitely learned about something. We learned things from our parents, but we now being this age, you kind of see a different perspective of why they were the way they were, and maybe some of the things that they themselves had to let go of in order to even get to the place with us where they were able to give us the affection, the amount of affection that they even gave to us.
Yeah. So Stacy had a question. Have you ever asked your fathers how they were raised and what was it like with their parents? And that, some context about my relationship with my dad. I feel like you come on in a way that, we're growing in our relationship and learning each other. And RK3, feeling like it's gravitating more towards like the friendship element of when, as you get older. But my dad grew up in a context where, my dad is 61, 62 years old. Man, I should know this, and hopefully he's not watching so he doesn't get mad. My dad is over 60, and my dad doesn't, he can't tell you if he's ever met his father. So the context of having a boy and trying to raise your boy into a man, but not having that example for yourself, as you're still trying to figure out, what does manhood look like for you? So it causes some tense moments in there. And my dad, I remember asking him, and he said, the translation for me was providing for the household, working hard. My dad worked extremely hard. Working hard was the love language. I didn't necessarily, feel like it was modeled or to say that I love you or I care about you. As long as I was putting food on the table and clothes on your back and we had a roof over our head, that was how I was taught to demonstrate love for you. So yeah, I can resonate with a lot what you guys were saying.
I would say that might be. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. You mentioned that your dad said to stay focused at the airport. Did you say anything? What were your feelings? Well, you kind of expressed your feelings right then. It was kind of wild. Did you say anything back to him in that moment, or did you have any conversations with him? Have you had any conversations with him since then about that moment of you leaving and like hearing what he said, or was it just kind of like that's how things are?
So I didn't respond to my dad back to say, hey, like, are we gonna do anything else? Now, to be honest, I'm not trying to be hard. Like, please, anyone who's watching this, I'm not trying to be hard on my dad, but I don't remember him hugging me up until that point, right? My dad wasn't a hugger. He wasn't, very affectionate. But as someone is saying in the comments, I think, that's part of his upbringing, part of his own relationship with his dad and stuff. And I've come to understand that was the best. He did the best he could do. Right. We've never had the conversation where I said, why did you do that? With my brothers and myself, my dad, we've laughed and we've joked about it. Yeah. Hey, we're leaving. This is what was said. That was a joke. Yeah. I will say a funny story, a funny connection is my father was coming up to the U.S. to visit us. I was getting married. I was picking my dad up from the airport. And I remember coming up to meet him. And my dad walks up to me, right? So just to say, not only did he say, keep your focus, he shook my hand, right?
Mm.
So I am coming to meet him now, and I'm ready to do what we always do, shake his hand. And my dad hugged me.
Wow.
And I remember him, I think he kissed me on the cheek.
Oh boy.
And the only words I could remember saying is, the car's outside. I didn't have a word to say, like, what the first time I remember this as, past being a kid.
Yeah.
So it was weird for me, but I realized in that moment, he had grown in some of the things that I felt like he didn't do well with affection and those things.
Yeah.
That's funny. I went through a very similar moment with my dad as well, where because he was like that. And to speak to, I think it was Stacy's question about how my father was raised, right? So that whole thing, Pierre, about just working to provide, and there's a set of rules, established rules that you live by, and the deviation to that is slim, if at all. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of that very stringent type of strict structure that he went through is the same thing that he put us through, and the whole affection, and I don't remember any of that growing up. Like, I'm not sure that he hugged me,
right?
As a kid. I don't even remember.
Right.
So I get older, right? And I've already married by this time. And so I go to the house, and my mom over time had been evolving as it relates to affection and that affection and that kind of stuff. So she's evolving. And so she's been now giving me hugs when I come and giving me hugs when I leave. And so one day, my dad and I are talking about something. We have a serious conversation, and I thank him for what he was telling me. And as I turn to leave, my mom shouts out, "Hug your father." And we both literally, the face I just made, we both look at each other like, what? and just like gingerly like hugged each other. Like, it was just so awkward. It was funny to me. And I had to chuckle because I'm like, that's just not something that he was used to.
Yeah.
And so because that's not something he was used to, it's not something he could readily give out to anybody else. It's not that he wasn't affectionate. It's not that he didn't love me. And that's something I had to kind of learn as I got older.
Yeah.
It's not that he didn't love me. It's just that there are certain things, certain ways that people go through things based on their family of origin, how they process things, and the way they process it is how it comes out in their kids. And that made me be a little bit more intentional about recognizing where those gaps may be between me and my own kids.
Yeah. So I know Pierre is hosting this, but I got a question.
Now you hosting our game. Go ahead.
How do we navigate like the whole feeling of knowing that you were loved, but not necessarily feeling those emotions or feeling, getting the physical affirmation of that, and then maybe inside of you somewhere actually wanting that physical affirmation? How did you guys navigate that?
I think that's not everyone's. We talk about love languages. We commented on, that's not everyone's love language. So if that's not your primary love language, you may not feel like there's a lack there anyway, right? I think for some, a lot of this is theory for me, but I have a young niece and nephew who I've been with kind of through their development, and so speaking to my in-laws and my brother and sister-in-law, time spent seems to be a really good universal love language for children. So even if it's not affection, it seems as though I've seen my niece and nephew, just them spending time with their kids, and they've been more intentional about being physically affectionate. But even without that, I think kids seeing the effort that you're putting in seems like that is a good universal love language that they understand. And so for some people, that's just not their primary love language. So they may not even feel like there's a lack,
right?
In this context that we've been talking about.
Yeah. To Robert's question, I think affection and those things are definitely an area that you say, wow, I wish there was more of this. But as I have raised my children, I've been, working with my kids, there are things that I'll do with them. And I say, it's like it harkens back to something. And I go, oh, my dad that did that with me. And it helps me to remember I need to give him more credit for things that he
Yeah.
did that I sometimes have forgotten. And my dad took us to ride bikes. My dad took us to fly, learn to fly a kite and those kind of things. And it's like, yeah, there was more I wanted, but I don't think I've given him credit for a lot of what he's done. And I think that's for everyone that we can do. That's something that I've grown in, just saying, be more grace, just showing more grace and just remembering more of the things that he's done. He's done for me.
Yeah, I'm with Kymone on that. Going back and remembering there's some things that you wanted, or maybe even comparative to other families or other dads and their sons, some things that you wanted modeled for you. But how many of us have taken the time to go back and say, okay, kind of here's the list of what I did learn or what I did experience, what I did take away, and allow yourself to kind of rest in those emotions. Because when you think about it, for me, my dad is a consummate entrepreneur who can talk to anybody about anything. He has never met a stranger, and he's always willing to take a risk. And I realized, whoa, like I'm 38 and people ask me like, how are you so willing to take a risk and be fearless and try different things? And I have to go back to, as a kid, whenever my dad was working on projects, he would let me be in the room and be close to him.
Wow.
Steal his computer paper back when computer paper was really, really expensive, and work on my little projects while he was around. And those, some things rubbed off that I don't always give him, like you were saying, always give him credit for.
Yeah, that's good.
Wow. So, I think the whole love language thing, though, and kind of piggybacking off of what Matt was saying, I don't know that I recognized that I was missing something as a younger child because I didn't know any better. I think it was literally as I became older that I started to say, hey, wow, not slaying my parents in any way, but it's just like as you kind of begin to know more and recognize and know more about you, you kind of say, wait a minute, because I as somebody who's married now, right? It's only after being married that I recognize that touch is like my primary love language. Right. And I would not have known or recognized that as a kid, but I do remember. And so, yeah, like Kymone, I do remember there were times where my dad just kind of put his hand on my head and rubbed my head, like when I did something, right? And he would just walk by and just kind of put his hand on my head, and I remember feeling like just real special. And he didn't have to say nothing. He didn't have to say I'm proud of you. He didn't have to say I love you. He didn't have to do anything, but it was just that thing that it just made me. He touched me and made me whole. Yeah. And those are some of the moments that, I do recognize that, yeah, maybe he knew more. Maybe there was some stuff that he, in his best efforts, understood and gave to me that I didn't even recognize.
I'm jealous of my father grew a beard. And I would be, a little kid, and I'd be trying to fight him or do little things little kids do. And my dad, he would have these moments sometimes where his beard was growing in and it was all scraggly and scruffy. And he would kind of hold me down and rub his beard on my cheek. And I would just be screaming, like, let me go. And then I would, go back for another round. And then, those moments, and they weren't a lot of those RK3, but those, like, man, you remember those moments, and it's like, I do have the moments where I had those warm feelings.
I think it's important for each generation to learn from the last one, to do differently, put our kids in a position to make life better for their kids. Yesterday, I had a very interesting conversation with my son, and those who know my son, he measures his words. Okay, he lives with two sisters who talk a lot, and so he doesn't talk. He's not the very talkative one. When he does, in the midst of our family discussions, it's funny, it's insightful. But it was just him and I. And I said to him, "One, are you looking for? Is being a father something that you look forward to at some point?" He's like, "Yeah." And so I said to him, "When you look at me as a father, are there some things that you would do? What are some things that you would do the same that I've done?" He said, or that I've done well. He said, "I'd care for my children just like you do." So I was like, "What does that mean?" He's like, "I'd care for my children. If you know my son, I'm not." That was it, right? That's what you're gonna get. So I said, "What would you do differently?" He said, "I would play with my children more." And that was good for me to hear. Got another year to go, but it's, he may be sitting on a panel like this and say, I wish my dad would have spent more time playing with me. And I realized, we do the best we can. I'm more affectionate with him than my dad ever was with me, right? And touches his love language, but also play and those kind of things are something that he wished that I would have done more with him.
But come on, what made you even vulnerable enough to ask that question? Because hearing, us tell the stories about our fathers, it was like, we're not having no evaluative discussion. Like,
I know, it was random, and we have random conversations like that, because if we were to sit down and say, okay, we're going to have a conversation, it doesn't turn out well. But if we're just like doing something, in fact, the weird thing is we were tossing a ball back and forth. And in the midst of it, I started the conversation. It was just, maybe it was subconsciously I was preparing for this conversation or another video I had to do yesterday on fatherhood. But in my mind, I remembered at a young age, I wanted to be a father. So I was just kind of curious. Okay, do you want to be a father? Is this something you look forward to when you leave our home and you get out and, get into your career and stuff?
Hey, that's good. Come on, man. I may have to tuck that part away and pull it out pretty soon. I like that. I would love to hear. My son is a thinker, is an understatement. The way this dude processes at 17 is amazing to me. So I would love to hear what he has to say about it. That would be an eye-opening conversation for me.
I know when I went back to Uganda, this is kind of almost to the day a year since I met my father. I had many questions, just coming from the absentee context and knowing and being told for a lot of my life that a lot of my ways are like him. So kind of wanting to get a context of his fatherhood. And so, when I went there weren't a whole lot of opportunities to sit down and talk. And it's just 30 plus years is a lot to kind of pack in as far as questions and of who you are and why you are the way you are, so I can get a better understanding of why I am the way I am. But one of the things that I kind of have known growing up is that in Ugandan and African and probably West Indian culture, the roles are very defined. Old school roles are very defined. In even in my language, the words "I love you" don't really translate to the "I love yous" that you would use in the English language. So there's not really a place for it. It's very formal. Our father just provides kind of the same things that you guys have been echoing. So he kind of got that same deal. His father was just seemed to be respected. He was to be seen, not heard as a child, and he kind of modeled that. And I think he talked to me about he's very reflective even now, and talks about wishing he had been a bit more affectionate and trying to model that now with his other kids. So I kind of hearing the same things from you all that I heard from him when I asked him those questions.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Kymone, because
Hazel asked how old my son was. He said,
okay. Yeah. Okay. No, I was just saying, I appreciate you sharing that vulnerability, because a lot of times in our heads, we want to know the answer to those questions. But do we really want to, though? Because it might hit us, and it might hurt us. And I remember a couple of years ago, I did something similar and asked a question to my kids about what are some things that we can do better. And one of the things, I don't remember the exact words, but pretty much they kind of felt like I was on the computer a lot. They felt like I was on my device a lot. And in my head, I'm kind of like, what are you talking about? I'm working. I'm doing this. It's like church stuff. It's
my business, RK3.
Listen, right? It's church stuff. And so the thing that my wife said to me, she was like, listen, in your mind, you might be able to delineate between your personal and your work and your business and your church and all those responsibilities. But you got to recognize that all of those things are encapsulated in the same device. And what they see is that one thing, and that thing can become a barrier between you and them. They see you on it, and it's kind of, oh, daddy's busy. Let me go this way. And I mean, that thing hit me, man.
Yeah.
That thing hit me, man. So, I mean, I'm not perfect at it yet, but one of the things that I'm working at still is like literally when they come in the room, if I've got a device, I put it down. I put it down so that I can be present with them.
Yeah. David Turner has this question. What have you struggled with the most? What have you struggled the most with in trying to raise your kids differently from what you experienced with your father? Not that they were wrong, but you sought to do differently.
Wow.
That's a good question. I would say for me, the thing that I really encouraged the three of them to do, and at first I was going to say especially the girls, but it was only the girls for a while. But you can talk to us about anything.
Yeah.
You do not have to be afraid that we're just going, like our first reaction, which I had to work on because I'm a knee-jerk kind of person as it relates to communication. But you can be confident in the fact that we are not going to jump down your throat, even if we feel like the scenario calls for that response. You can come to us about anything, good, bad, ugly, whether you think it goes against the morals of the code of the household. It doesn't matter. You can talk about anything. And for me, that was important because I did not feel like I can go to my parents with everything. Certain things that happen in your teenage years, certain experiences that you go through, certain, relationships and puppy love type things that happen, and the things that are flying around in your head as a result of what you're learning from your, exposed to with your friends and that kind of stuff. I could not go to my parents with all of that. And so that was the one major thing. I was like, no matter what, you can pull us up.
Yeah.
You can interrupt us. And it happens often. We'll be watching something and one of them will come in and start talking and phew, off goes the TV. Hands down, we will listen to whatever you have to say.
Yeah. So just in case you didn't hear my answer, Hazel, my son is 17. What I have struggled with, and this is a really good question. So because I wanted my father to be more friendly, like down, I feel like one of the struggles is making sure there's the clear delineation. These are the rules. This is it. Being more firm and setting more boundaries and structure so that the kids know, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. And so I've had to battle that, and my wife has helped me with that because, there's a part of you want to be the cool dad, but there are times, there's some things kids won't do unless you're the parent, make sure that you fulfill your role of making them do it. And I've had to okay, they'll be mad, whatever, but this is my role. And that's been my struggle.
Yeah. I think mine's similar to Oliver, at least in the relationship department. I mean, I remember in high school kind of having my first girlfriend, right? And like my senior year of high school. And that wasn't something that I felt like I could talk to my parents about. Now, we ended up having some conversations about it because there was, we went to an event and this, girl sat at the table with a girl that I was attracted to. And my dad kind of told me what he thought about her. And some of it wasn't so much like she was a bad person. My dad was like real deep. Like he's looking at what the family structure of that person is like, their background and all that. And I'm a kid like, yo, I mean, I'm just trying to get a little peck. I'm just, we just trying to go to McDonald's, something like that. But he's going real deep. So I mean, for me, it's really now about as early as possible, and I think we've done a fairly decent job at this. I celebrate the job that my wife and I have done at this. Just kind of allowing them to know that they can talk to us about some of those things and really be able to get feedback without feeling like they have to hide or, kind of only tell us up to the point where they feel like we won't get mad.
Yeah.
Everything for me, like I've said before, is theory. The things I struggle with in my mind are obviously I don't have a blueprint, right? So there's nothing to come before in that sense. I don't really have a blueprint for what that looks like. My blueprint is kind of an amalgamation of some of my friends who are at different stages of fatherhood than me. Like people in church growing up and seeing, the products of those fathers. The struggle for me as I listen to certain stories is, you always want better for your kids than you have had, right? And so as time has gone on, immigrant families, the story typically is your parents struggle to put you in a better place, and hopefully you do a little bit better financially. And so my struggle is like, I want to be in a better financial place, be financially responsible, emotionally responsible. But then how do you teach your children? I guess this is a question for you guys that I'm posing. How do you then teach your children values that you've learned growing up and seeing maybe a bit of a struggle from your parents as they immigrated? How do you teach them those values while still providing a better lifestyle, maybe financially, than you grew up with? So that's one of the things that I'm battling with about how I'm going to teach my son and other children as they come, or if they come along.
Yeah. Man, I learned to have, man, to apologize to my kids.
Yeah.
And that joint has been rough. Like, man, okay, I blew up at y'all. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Daddy was off. That was not a good response. Or, I accused you of doing something that you didn't do. Or, I dropped the ball. I promised I was going to do this for you and I didn't. And the gut punch because at first I was like, I'm a parent. I don't have to apologize to nobody. I don't remember getting a lot of apologies. This is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
But, having two girls and the framework for them and things that I, wanting to change and adjust. And I remember, going to them the first time they were younger and said, Daddy, sorry. They looked at me like, this is what? What are you? But I found that it gives me, like, the moments when I apologize, fills up their, and I know we've used these analogies, kind of fills up their bank. So when it's a moment where daddy has to make a tough call, or, daddy's assertion was right, and he can't be the cool dad, Kymone, he's got to be the stern dad. They're better able to process it and understand it because they know, well, if daddy's off or if he makes a mistake, he's going to say, I'm sorry, or have the conversation about it. But that's been,
One of the things for me, Matt, was allowing my kids, you talked about values, allowing my kids to even question those values.
Okay.
Because growing up, this is what we do.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
There's no why. There's no explanation. This is what we do.
Yeah.
Period. So this is we go to church. This is how we dress. This is what we do. Right.
Sure.
And so being in a place where when my kids ask the question why, not shutting it down and not saying, oh, that's just how we've always done it, beginning to really process that. And in some ways, them asking that question, man, sometimes it's caused me to question my own values and belief system and kind of think about, wait a minute, I've been doing it that way all my life. Why do I really do it that way? Is it biblical? Is it what is it? Why do I do what I do, and why do I believe what I believe? Right. And so that's been the biggest thing for me, allowing them to be able to question some things and operate from figuring out what are the principles that we operate from, instead of just a list of do's and don'ts.
Yeah, that's good. I would piggyback you on that, Matthew. Just to piggyback on what RK3 just said, there's a certain level of and this is what I'm learning. There's a certain level of observation, training, and execution that happens throughout this parent-child relationship, right? So they, in that observation phase, they need to see how you
carry yourself.
Those two things, the need for expanding your territory, so to speak, against your value system. So see how you move in between those two things, how seamless it is, how difficult it is. So to speak to RK3's point, allow them to then question that that's that kind of training phase. You understand? Allowing them to kind of question and poke holes, and it forces you, like RK3 said, to think about how you're doing those things.
Right.
You know? And then you know, the natural progression is just allowing them to execute. They will follow in your footsteps based on what they've observed. So it's a process. It's an ongoing process, man. And as those things develop and change, and as you make a certain level of adjustments as they get older, and as your career grows or as your paths change, you'll be able to observe you incorporate your value system into each one of those phases.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to respond to what you said, Matthew. Mine may be a little different than what Oliver and Robert were touching on. I think I've had the struggle, the tug of war between sheltering my kids and wanting to provide this world for them that I didn't have, and then preparation for sort of like the world that they're going to go into. And in I will say these last few months, with them being at home, with us seeing the Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd case, and knowing that my son is leaving in a year, it really has been a heightened time of saying, okay, I know I wanted you to feel like this world is going to be great and loving and whatever, but son, this is the reality. You're a black young man. Here are some things you need to understand about how people view you. Now, this is not the first conversation, but we've had much more of them now. Because I realize I can't shield him. Like, he's going to be driving somewhere, and I'm not going to be around. And so there's some tough conversations that we have to have. And I think, you know, there's that tug of war. You want your kids to look at this world in a certain light. You want to put them in a certain place, and then they're going to interact with people. You want them to think the best and positive, but you have to have sometimes some conversations that helps them to understand, okay, this is the world, and there's going to be some struggle, and here's who you are in the midst of that and what you need to deal with. So
that's good.
That's good.
I want to ask, Kymone, you know, how have the rest of us been having conversations with our children about what's been going on, just the major headlines? You know, a couple of years ago, my kids and I, we started watching, you know, that classic series, Eyes on the Prize. And Eyes on the Prize has some it's got some graphic scenes. And I mean, you know, people hanging from trees and, you know, some tough scenes. And my daughter's, you know, younger, they're 10 and 12 now, but, you know, a couple of years ago when we started watching, you know, and it wasn't that I was comfortable with them seeing the scenes, but I felt like it was part of kind of the fabric and story of, you know, stuff that won't be in history books, and that I wanted to share with them the same way in some respect my parents shared it with me. And then with the news headlines, we talk about it as well. And how are you guys navigating that conversation and even the images, because they have their own devices, so it's not like they need you to show them anything. It's already there. How are you wrestling with it, or how have you wrestled with it?
For me, it's just having the conversations. I mean, we can shield them from it, but like you said, they have their own devices. They've got friends, and even if they didn't see it first, a friend says, "Hey, did you see this?" Or, you know, what do you think about that? So there was one day, I think it was after the Ahmaud Arbery thing, where my daughter must have been talking with her friends, and they must have been having some philosophical discussions, pretty deep, because she came out of her room and she was upset, right? And she started asking me questions like, why does this happen? Why do people allow, why can't we just shut this down? Why did they do that? You know, what are we supposed to do? What can we? And I'm like, I don't have the answer, babe. Princess, I don't know. You know, I don't know why it happens. I know it's happened for a very long time. And I know that there's only a couple of things that we can really do. Number one, hang on to your faith, hang on to your hope, and then prepare yourself and work on you and do the best with you, so that you can then be influential and make an impact in the world around you. Those are the biggest things that I've got to give. And my job is to show you as best as I can how to do that. But as far as controlling other people and answering the questions why they do foolishness, I don't know.
Yeah. I think those conversations, as Robert's saying, having conversations, you know, looking at news, looking at history stuff together, even things that are uncomfortable. And what has been helpful, I'm just being in my home, in those discussions, there are some things my kids bring to the discussion that enlighten me. Their grasp of history and some of those things is enlightening to me. One of my kids in particular, I realized my father was very much conscious. He was a very conscious person. It's weird. My father was so conscious. There are times I was like, yo, you don't need it. It doesn't have to be this much level of consciousness, right? But I've noticed my daughter is almost like, wow, this kind of bridged the generation, and she's that kind of consciousness. And so the discussions we are having aren't necessarily just me sharing with them. It's us all learning together and saying, okay, now that we know this, what are some of the things? And I think at this stage, at them being almost 13, 16, 17, a lot less shielding from the realities of what exists.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that. Kymone, that's kind of been the experience here because it's only my 17-year-old here at home now. So, and he is a very critical thinker, and so a lot of those conversations, some of the conversations have actually been initiated by him because his personality is such that he's the type of person that he will come to us when he's ready to process that out loud. By the time he comes to us, it has been well thought out. So when he sits with us, it's kind of like, come on, where we're just like listening, like, oh, you got a point there. You're right. I didn't think about it like that. That actually makes sense. And so those are what some of those interactions have been like for us, between us and Justin.
We're nearing the end of our time together. I mean, it's been almost 52 minutes.
That was
quick. We've really been unpacking. We appreciate all the comments that have come through and the questions. We tried to get to as many many questions as we could. Let's do one from Kirk before we run out of time. At the different stages of fatherhood, I think this is good that we can help kind of pour into Matthew in our last few minutes as well. At the different stages of fatherhood.
Hey, look, this has been great for me, man. I'm gonna go back over. So thank you, guys.
What is the number one thing you wish you knew earlier?
I don't know if this is something that I wish I knew earlier. I just kind of wish I'd have thought about it this way earlier. You only have one shot.
No pressure.
You only got one shot. There's like sometimes we make decisions about our children and the lives that they're leading and how we interact with them. And not that we don't get to say I'm sorry but you only have one shot for that first impression on some things. And when kids form an impression or when they form a thought about everything after that is kind of trying to make up ground. Right. So the decisions that we make about like where they go to school, the decisions that we make about their friends, who they get to hang out with, the decisions that we make about what they get to watch, when they get to watch certain things, the conversations that we have, whether we have them too early or too late, you only get one shot. So that I wish that was something that I thought about much earlier.
That's good.
Yeah,
man. I think for me, if I could sum it up, I'm gonna post a video tomorrow that I made in 2018 on Father's Day, and it was literally, if not that year, maybe a few years before that I realized this, and that is, it is not an exact science. Fatherhood is just not an exact science, and I spent a lot of years beating myself up, comparing myself to other scenarios that I was looking at from the outside. Evaluating my kids' experiences and their successes, using that as a tool to evaluate my efficacy as a father. I've been through it for years and realized, wait a minute, this is not an exact science. like what Pierre does, I may not need to do or may not have to do, or it's just not going to work in my family. What Kymone does may work. What I work may not work for Kymone. And so that's the thing I wish I knew, man, earlier, that is not an exact science. You do what you can do, you learn and grow, you apply and adjust, and it's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, and wow, I guess if I could say two things. One, keep it simple. A lot of times we think our kids remember big things. Sometimes they remember simple things that are done on a regular basis. Just the time you spent doing this. And then the next thing I'll say to all fathers watching this is just give grace. Grace to your father. Grace to your own self in the midst of, as Pierre mentioned, man, just saying sorry and then forgiving yourself for the times that you don't do it the way you want to do it. And then grace to your kids as you're raising them, because they make mistakes, and them seeing you exhibit grace to them just allows them to see a full picture of what God is like with us.
Yeah, I would say, just keep in mind that eventually interruptions will become absences.
Wow.
And my kids interrupt me from time to time. They'll come if I'm working on a talk or a presentation, or if I'm in the middle of a call. They'll come down. And sometimes the only thing they want is 3 to 5 minutes. Me taking my attention. We were talking about the devices, RK3, 3 to 5 minutes of me taking my time away, focused on them. They're good. We dance, or we talk, or we play a game, we tell a joke, and then they're fine. They go off, do their thing. They just wanted those few moments of kind of checking in and being a part and being welcomed into their world.
Yeah.
But eventually, those are going to be absences. I'm going to look up and they're not going to be here. They're going to be in college or military or running their own business or volunteering somewhere. And it'll be in those moments where I'll wish that I could be interrupted again.
Wow.
Yeah. I look at David Turner's comment. David said, and he pointed this to Matthew specifically, but he was like, take pictures every week
Start them out
on the day he's born, let it go to the cloud automatically.
Yeah, no, that's really good one. I don't know. I don't know how much time we have. One thing that popped in mind, a question I had for you guys. I don't know how much time we have left though, so I don't want to open up another thing. My quick question was, how has fatherhood helped you see God as a father?
Ooh.
You're gonna take my closing? Oh, okay. I said we're all hosting, so we good.
That was my question as you guys were talking. How has your understanding of God as a father changed from before you had kids to now? I mean, for me as an absentee father, there's been a disconnect there. When I hear God the Father, it's head knowledge, but I don't really feel it because I just have that. So I'm assuming that once I have children, it will change for me because I'll actually be taking on that role. And so give another layer to my relationship and the way I view God. So I'm wondering how that changed for you guys as being a father of kids. If it did at all. I'm assuming it did. And how did that change? I don't know how long it's going to take. That's a pretty layered question, but
I'll be super quick. It's probably based on something Kymone just said.
Okay.
For me, realizing the amount of grace that has been extended to me in all of the nonsense I have been a part of, all of the growing, all of the phases, all of the
worship.
all of the disconnects, all of the starting things and not finishing them, all of that. And then looking at how ridiculous I would get with my kids about the same thing. It's like that story where the guy where in the Bible where the guy owed some money.
Right.
And he got part of that, and then he went and got crazy and reckless with the next dude.
Yeah.
That was the realization for me. I'm like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. I think for me, really quickly, pay attention to the feelings that you feel when the kids get you emotionally.
Yeah.
The thing that it's made me think about is when they do something and I get annoyed or upset, I had to take a step back and realize, and ask myself the question, whoa, does God feel that way about me when I do that?
Yeah. I have
No,
three
no,
kids.
no, no.
ahead.
Come on, let me go. You go last. You go last. Man, Matt, thanks for stealing the question.
Hey man, I'm here to
Off. When I get really upset with my kids, sometimes it's easy for me to withhold my attention from them.
Ooh.
Like they made me mad. I don't even want to talk to them.
Yeah.
And especially if you make me mad before bedtime,
Mercy.
I don't want to come in your room because I'm
Ooh.
upset. And I'm like, man, if
Mhm.
God did me like that,
Wow.
whenever I did stuff that was out of line or not in the right direction, like if he just took his presence away from me, I would be messed up. So who am I when my kids make me upset? Who am I to deny the
Take your time.
Take some notes.
That's
Yeah.
serious, man.
Yeah.
Mm.
who am I to take away from my kids when they make me upset?
Ooh.
The very thing that they need from me
Wow.
Wow.
in that moment.
Wow.
Your presence.
Good.
Presence.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Man,
That's
that's
good.
And
Yeah.
it's better to be in the room and elicit a grumbled prayer
Wow.
than to not go into the room at all.
Wow.
So
that made my hands sweat. Whew. That's serious.
Yeah. I have three kids, and I realize when my son was born, there was this rush of emotion that I felt.
Right.
And I was like, I can't love anyone as much as the love I have for him right now. And then when my daughter was born, I felt the same rush. And it's so interesting to think that God has an abundance of love for each of us. And it's not like he's chopping it up with each person. It's like he loves us as only kids, right? Like I
Wow.
feel like I'm God's only child with the love he gives me. And that's what I feel like. I don't have a third of a love for each one of them. I have like full love for you and full love for you and full love for you. And I'll say this, I'm going to go back to grace. I think one of the things I had to learn, like especially with my son, because there was a part of me where I wanted my son to get it right.
Yeah.
And just like every kid, I remember, he went through an awkward stage, a clumsy stage, but stuff would break or whatever. And I remember that was me. And I watched something and I remember someone saying, I want my son to have this thought of me. I made a mistake. I have to call my dad. And that's what I want, because I feel like that's God. God is saying, when you mess up, I want you to look to me. And I want that to be my children's, like, Dad, something bad happened.
Wow.
Let me not avoid you. I want to call you.
Right. Versus hiding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm done, gentlemen.
yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that.
No,
Oh my goodness.
thank you. I feel like I've benefited the most. I'm soaking up all of this information, and it's been really good. I appreciate it.
You about to have the same conversation in 10 years, bro.
Probably.
Yeah.
Hopefully, having learned along the way. So I'll be reaching out for sure.
Listen, before we shut down this conversation today about fatherhoods and about loving and leading our families. Hey, y'all, let's do some shameless plugs. I'm always a fan of shameless plugs. All of us are working on projects, things that we're working on with our kids, things that even if we're not working on it with our children are seeing us work on them.
Yeah.
Just kind of let's do. Everybody's got like a podcast or like a T-shirt.
Robert?
Everybody's got.
Don't even start with me.
So
yeah, let's start with Kymone. I think we should start with him.
Yeah.
All right. Again, I have three wonderful kids, and two of them are entrepreneurs. My daughters have their own businesses, and one of the things that we've been working on over the last year is helping to empower other parents and their teens to start businesses and in the teenage phase. So that's what I'm working on. I'm excited. We're doing a camp in a couple weeks for teenagers who want to start their own business.
Nice.
I'll jump in. My wife and I, Denali LLC, marriage coaching,
Nice.
seminars, facilitating, just passionate about all things marriage. Denali.org is the website. And I feel like I don't know, God's pushing me in a direction. So as projects are concerned, I'm developing something for men. It's specifically for men. It's not a relationship-based thing, so it's kind of going in a different direction.
Okay.
But it's bubbling in me, man. So look for that book to come soon, very soon.
I like the bubble. I like the bubble.
I have no shameless plugs currently, but speaking of working on things, it's funny that Pierre reached out to me about doing this particular conversation or participating, because I've been in conversations with a couple people just about, it started off as a selfish thing, like, man, I need to interview some guys about fatherhood because I'm about to be a father, but something that I want to work on and start as far as a conversation for his fathers and fathers to be, because I think that, you know, Pierre and I were talking about this before, like, this is a conversation that's not had enough. So if there's a group, I've been listening to a couple of podcasts that are out there that exist, but I think that there is definitely a niche for fathers who look like we do, especially with the political climate. So that may be coming down the road. So I'm looking forward to developing and working on that idea, just studying fatherhood and studying dads.
Nice. Listen, man, let me give you the cheat code that every other person on this panel uses. We use shamelessly to be considered as not necessarily an expert, but to be considered a leading voice on anything. Just be the person who interviews every other person about that thing.
Hey, man,
that's a good idea.
That's all we do. We all have podcasts, and people look to, hey, you know, Ali and Denise have so much to say about relationships. Well, they interview a lot of people about relationships, and that's the cheat code. So we're not just giving it to you; we're giving it to everybody else who's watching it. And y'all know my thing, Worship and Word. You guys are here as one of my projects. So RK3, I mean, you're the Renaissance man.
Well, it does feel like there's a whole lot happening in my world. So yeah, I mean, all of it kind of leads to one thing, but I've got the podcast, the RK3show.com, and interviewing a lot of people there about leadership, communication, storytelling. And then I've got, speaking of plugs, behind me, the Storytellers Growth Lab. That is my Facebook group. That is my community where we really talk about how to tell better stories, how to tell your story in a more confident, creative way. And then, of course, I am a speaker, trainer in the area of leadership, communication, storytelling. And you can find me at robertkennedy3.com. If you want to get connected on other social media, I'm Robert Kennedy 3 everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Robert Kennedy 3. Try to keep it easy. All right. So that's what's up. Looking forward to connecting with each and every one of you very soon.
Kirk, I saw your comment. I'll be reaching out. For sure.
And let me tell you guys why this is so important. Not just the conversation that we've had about fatherhood, but also the sharing and our interests and things that we're working on. I mean, you know, Matthew, we've been friends for such a long time, and a lot of what I'm doing now comes as a result of, you know, our conversation at Chick-fil-A like 4 years ago. Kymone has coached me through some major life changes and transitions out in deep waters. RK3 is currently one of my coaches, and brought me into his mastermind group and is working me through some entrepreneurial things in the speaking and training area. And then with Ali, we connected and you know, reciprocated, just helping each other with various projects and ideas. So this is a part of it too, folks. This is a huge part of what it's like to build community and to help people grow. So yeah, I had a great conversation with y'all today. It's over an hour. I know we could go and continue talking. We didn't talk about raising men versus raising women. We didn't go into that. Different parenting styles between us and our spouses. We didn't go into that at all. So hopefully we'll be able to do a part two.
Part two for sure.
Yep. Not next year Father's Day.
No. That's too long. That's way.
This was good stuff. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you.
Way too
Thank
long.
you, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Yeah, so we want to pray, and then we'll let you guys go. Remember, Worship and Word Conversations is not a replacement for anything. Hopefully, it's a catalyst for you to have these conversations with the people that you know and love, and keep the conversation going. I'm going to ask our friend RK3 to pray for us, and then we're going to let you guys go.
God, we love you. We lift you up. We magnify you. We glorify your name because you're an awesome God. You take care of us. We're here. The sun is shining. It may be raining. It may be thunderstorming outside, but we're here. We can hear, we can feel, we can touch. And I just appreciate this conversation. I appreciate brotherhood. I appreciate fatherhood. I appreciate the wisdom in this circle. And so I ask that as we've been able to converse, as we've been able to have some discussion here, that the fruit of this discussion will not just be void. It will not just be something that lays down, but it will be something that impacts the life of even one father, helping them to grow their children for your name's honor and glory. We thank you for Pierre and this vision, and we just continue to ask that you bless him, God, exceedingly abundantly above all that he could ever ask or think. And we just thank you for using him in this season. In Jesus' worthy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, folks, take care.
All right.
Happy Father's Day, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Same to you guys.